There is a day, once a month, when an Amish farmhouse in Lancaster County smells like lye soap and wood smoke before the sun is even up. No washing machine hums, no dryer clicks on, and by the time the family sits down for supper, every stitch of clothing a dozen or more people have worn for the last 4 weeks has been washed, wrung, dried and folded, without a single watt of electricity touching any of it. The easy assumption is that no electricity means no system. It's the opposite. What you're about to see is one of the most efficient laundry operations in the country, and it runs on 150 years of trial and error. Monday is wash day. It has been wash day in Amish households for generations, a rhythm so old that even the children know it without being told, the same way they know Sunday is for church. Some households trace the habit back to an old Pennsylvania Dutch saying that a woman who washes on Monday has all week to get the rest of her work done, while a woman who puts it off is chasing the calendar by Thursday. Before dawn, the mother of the house is already in the wash house, a small separate building set off from the main home, specifically so the steam and the soap smell don't soak into the living quarters. The centerpiece of that wash house is a machine that looks, at first glance, almost normal. A tub, an agitator, a wringer bolted to the side. The difference is what's turning it. Instead of an electric motor, there's a small gasoline engine, or on some farms, a hydraulic or pneumatic system powered off a diesel compressor kept just for this. The Ordnung, the community's unwritten but deeply understood code of conduct, doesn't ban machines. It bans a connection, the public power grid, and the dependency that comes with it. A gas-powered wringer washer is allowed. A cord running to the electric company is not. That distinction trips up almost every outsider who visits a farm like this for the first time. They arrive expecting a washboard and a metal tub, something out of a museum display, and instead find a machine with moving parts, a fuel tank, and a job to do. The rule was never stay in the past. The rule is stay off the grid. And those two things only look the same from a distance. So the mother starts the little engine, and it sputters to life, and the tub begins to churn. This is where the myth falls apart for most viewers watching from a house with a front-loading washer in the next room. They picture a woman on her knees scrubbing a washboard in a metal basin, and for a handful of very conservative, very small settlements, that's still close to true. But for most Amish communities today, Laundry Day looks less like 1850 and more like a farmhouse with the electric bill removed and the ingenuity left in. Water is the first job, and it's not a small one. Before the engine even turns, someone, often one of the older boys, has already hauled water from a hand pump or a cistern, heated a portion of it over a wood stove until it's hot enough to cut grease, and hauled it into the wash house in buckets. A single wash day for a large family can mean hundreds of gallons moved by hand and shoulder before a single sock goes in the tub. That's not a detail thrown in for color, that's the actual labor cost hiding underneath "they just don't use electricity." Ask a 10-year-old on one of these farms what his Monday chores are, and hauling wash water usually tops the list, right alongside feeding the stock before school. It's treated less like a punishment and more like a right, the thing you graduate into once you're big enough to carry a full bucket without slopping half of it down your leg on the way in. The soap matters too, and it's rarely something bought off a shelf in town. Many households still render their own, boiling animal fat with lye in a big kettle out back until it sets into hard bars, the same process their great-grandmothers used, because buying commercial detergent in bulk is expensive, and making it yourself is nearly free once you already have the fat from butchering. It's harsher on the hands than a bottle of store-bought detergent. It's also gentler on a well system that has to filter and reuse every drop that goes down the drain. Loads are sorted the way any household sorts them, whites from colours, church clothes from field clothes. But the categories run deeper here because the clothes themselves carry more weight. A father's barn coat, caked in a month of manure and diesel and hay dust, cannot go in the same water as a daughter's Sunday dress, plain and dark and reserved only for worship. Sorting isn't just cleanliness. It's respect for what each piece of clothing means. And in a community where dress itself is a quiet statement of humility, a ruined Sunday dress isn't just an inconvenience, it's a small crisis. Once a load is in, the engine agitates it for a set stretch of time, and then comes the part that visitors always find the most striking: the wringer. 2 rollers, hand-cranked or belt-driven off that same small engine, squeeze the water out of each piece before it ever touches a clothesline. It's not gentle. Buttons pop. Hands have to move fast and careful because a wringer doesn't know the difference between a wet shirt and a wet finger. And every Amish mother has a story, or knows someone who does, about a hand pulled in too far. It's why young children are kept a careful distance from that machine, and why operating it becomes almost a rite of passage for a daughter old enough to be trusted with it. Then, outside, the clothesline. Rows of it, strung between the house and the barn, sometimes on a pulley system that lets a mother send a full line of wash out over the yard from her own back porch without ever stepping into the mud. There's an unspoken etiquette to the line itself. Underclothes go in the back row, hidden from the road. Sheets and towels go on the outer lines, big enough to act almost like a privacy screen. A neighbour driving by can read a farm's whole week off that clothesline if they know what to look for. Work shirts on a Monday, quilts airing out on a dry Wednesday, nothing at all on a Sunday, because Sunday is for rest, not for laundry. In summer, the sun and the wind do in 2 or 3 hours what a machine dryer would do in 1. For free, using nothing but weather. In winter, that changes everything, and this is where the real skill of the operation shows itself. Wet clothes hung outside in a Pennsylvania January will freeze solid within minutes, stiff as boards, and it looks for all the world like a wasted effort. But an Amish household knows something most modern renters never learn. Frozen clothes are actually drying. The ice sublimates, turning straight from solid to vapor in the cold, dry air, and a shirt that looked like a plank of wood at 9 in the morning is limp, dry, and ready to fold by early afternoon. When the weather turns too wet or too bitter even for that, the wash moves indoors, hung on racks near the wood stove or strung across the attic, where the constant heat of a home with no central air does the same job a dryer would, just slower. Ironing comes next, and it's its own small production. The classic tool is the sad iron, a solid block of cast metal heated directly on top of the wood stove, then carried to the ironing board and used until it cools, at which point it goes back on the stove and a second one, already hot, takes its place. A careful mother keeps 2 or 3 rotating through the stove at once, so the work never stalls. It takes a practiced hand to judge the heat by touch alone, a quick tap of a wet finger against the iron's face, because there's no dial, no setting, just years of doing it enough times to know. Diapers get their own quiet corner of the operation, and in a household with several small children at once, that corner runs almost daily instead of weekly. Cloth diapers are soaked, boiled to kill bacteria, and hung separately, often nearest the stove, so they're first back into rotation. There's no disposable option waiting in a cabinet. Every diaper a baby wears this month gets washed by hand, dozens of times, by the same mother running the Monday machine. The wringer itself has a history worth knowing because it explains why the current setup looks the way it does. Early wringer washers from the early 20th century ran on hand cranks alone, and injury reports from that era, Fingers, hands, even forearms pulled into the rollers are part of why later models added a quick release bar that pops the rollers apart the instant something goes wrong. Amish households that use engine-driven wringers today still favor that same safety release. Proof that no electricity was never the same rule as no safety improvement. The community adopts what keeps a mother's hand intact. It just won't adopt what plugs into the wall. By the end of a single Monday, a large family's laundry, sheets, work clothes, church clothes, diapers, the works, has moved through that whole chain: hauled water, home-rendered soap, gas engine agitation, hand-cranked wringing, either sun, wind or wood heat to finish it, and finally a hot iron for anything headed to church. One day, one system, zero connection to the grid. Now stretch that single Monday out across 4 weeks, and you start to see the real shape of what a month of laundry means in a household like this. It's not one big job. It's roughly 4 identical wash days stacked back to back, each one running the same route: hauling water, heating water, sorting, washing, wringing, drying, ironing, folding, put away by supper, and then starting the whole cycle again 7 days later, without missing a beat, month after month, for the entire life of the farm. Add in the seasonal detours. Canning season crowds the wash line with jars instead of shirts in late summer, and butchering season in the fall means an extra load just to get the blood and grease out of the men's work clothes. And you realize the calendar itself is partly built around getting the laundry done. And that's really the thing that sticks with you once you've walked through the whole process. It's not that this family lacks a washing machine. It's that they've built an entire small factory. Water source, heat source, soap source, power source, drying method that runs a month's worth of clean clothes for a dozen or more people, using almost nothing but sun, fire, gasoline, and their own 2 hands. It's not primitive. It's just a different kind of engineered. If you've enjoyed getting the full walkthrough of how a household like this actually runs, that's exactly the kind of thing I put together in a guide called the Amish Almanac. The wash day system, the seasonal rhythms, the tools, all of it laid out in one place instead of scattered across a dozen videos. Scan the QR on screen or grab the link in the description. All right, back to it. What's easy to miss, watching from the outside, is that none of this is treated as a hardship inside the home. There's no dread hanging over a Monday morning, the way there might be for a family somewhere else facing a broken dryer and a mountain of towels. This is simply the rhythm the week is built around, the same way a modern household plans around trash pickup or the school run. The mother who fires up that little engine before sunrise isn't performing hardship for anyone's benefit. She's running her house the way her mother ran hers, and her grandmother before that. A chain of women who each solved the same problem: keeping a large family clean and clothed with whatever tools their own moment in time allowed. Whether that was a washboard, a hand crank wringer, or the small gas engine turning in that wash house today. It's worth saying too that not every Amish household does this identically. An old order family in Lancaster County and a new order family in Ohio might land on slightly different tools, one leaning harder on hand crank equipment, another allowing a bit more small engine assistance. Because each settlement's ordnung is set locally, by its own bishops, based on its own read of where the line sits between usefulness and dependency. What stays constant across nearly all of them is the reasoning underneath the rule, not the exact machine sitting in the wash house. Wash day also carries a quieter social function that outsiders rarely see. If a mother in the district is sick, or has just had a baby, or is grieving a loss in the family, Neighbouring women will often show up unannounced on her Monday and simply take over the wash, running her line the same way they'd run their own. No discussion needed. It's not charity in the way a casserole dropped on a porch is charity. It's closer to an assumed obligation. The same expectation that would have someone show up to help raise a barn or bring in a harvest before rain. The laundry line becomes one more place where the community checks on itself without ever having to say so out loud. And underneath all of it sits the actual reason the electricity stays off in the first place, which has nothing to do with nostalgia and everything to do with faith. The Ordnung isn't a rulebook against technology for its own sake. It's a boundary drawn to protect something the community values more than convenience. A household that depends on itself, on its neighbours, and on God, rather than on a grid, a company, and a bill. A washing machine plugged into the wall might save 2 hours on a Monday, but it also quietly ties that home to the outside world in a way the community has decided, generation after generation, isn't worth the trade. The gas engine in the wash house is proof that they're not against machines. They're against the dependency that usually rides in with them. There's a quieter lesson buried in all of it too, one that has nothing to do with religion and everything to do with how a household runs. Every piece of this system exists because someone, decades ago, sat with the actual problem. Dirty clothes, no grid, a farm full of people, and solved it with what was on hand. Nothing here is an accident or a relic. The wash house placement, the Monday timing, the sorting order, the 2 irons rotating on the stove, the underclothes hidden on the back line, all of it is the accumulated answer to a question a plugged-in household never has to ask. Because the answer showed up already solved, hidden inside a machine with a cord. Children grow into this whole operation the same slow way they grow into every other piece of farm work. A 5-year-old starts by handing clothespins up to a mother working the line. By 8 or 9, that same child is old enough to sort a basket without being told which pile is which. By early teens, a daughter is running the wringer herself, and a son is the one hauling the water before school without anyone having to remind him it's Monday. Nobody sits the children down for a lesson. They absorb the whole system by being present for it, month after month, until one day they're the ones running it for a household of their own. What you've really watched across this whole month is a household solve the same problem every family on Earth solves, keeping people clean and clothed, using an entirely different toolkit than the one sitting in your own laundry room. Water hauled instead of piped in, hot on demand. An engine instead of a motor tied to the grid. The sun and the wind doing the work a dryer usually claims credit for. None of it is a lesser version of Laundry Day, it's a parallel one, built by hand, refined over a century and a half, and still running exactly on schedule every single Monday. So the next time a whole month rolls by and you're annoyed that the dryer buzzer went off in the middle of your show, it's worth remembering there's a farmhouse not far from a highway, somewhere in Pennsylvania or Ohio or Indiana, where a family just finished the exact same task you're complaining about, using a system built entirely without the outlet you're standing next to. Same result. Clean clothes for a household. Just a completely different answer to how you get there.